Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is. It is.
Very good. Very good. Right. Okay. One last question, Ellie, and that is, how long do I have? How long does it usually go on for?
45 minutes, say.
Good. All right. We're done. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. In these days of isolation, we have to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Zoom. An additional, maybe in the morning, we made Birkas HaShachar, Pakeach Ivrim, Zokef Kefufim. Maybe we need to make a special bracha just that we have the Zoom facility. Enables us to connect with each other and learn a bit of Torah together, and that's wonderful. Let's have a look at a couple of points on the parsha. I entitled today's shir "The Contemporary Relevance of a Machlekes between the Rashi and the Ramban." And this is just something which I find fascinating, which takes us a little bit deeper into the subject of the parsha, which is, of course, the Meraglim. The Meraglim was the sending of the spies. Moshe Rabbeinu and Klal Yisrael are in the Midbar, are in the desert. And at this point in the narrative of the Chumash, everybody believes that they're just about to enter Eretz Yisrael. Within a few days, they'll be in Eretz Yisrael, and they will be able to live in the land of Israel and continue their journey in the most successful way possible. And Shlach Lecha is, in that sense, the watershed, is the parsha where everything changes. And as a result of the Meraglim, as a result of the whole issue, the Meraglim, Klal Yisrael, of course, as we all know, remain 40 years in the Midbar, and it's only the next dar, it's only the next generation who managed to come into Eretz Yisrael. So in a sense, the whole parsha revolves around attitudes towards the land of Israel. So you can see already, I think, that this is something of significant contemporary relevance. The issue of how we relate to the land of Israel and how we speak about the land of Israel. One of the interesting features of the parsha is that the Pasuk speaks about the Meraglim in the end of the parsha when they come back and they deliver a negative report about Eretz Yisrael. They're referred as Motzi'ei Dibas Ha'aretz. The Torah uses the same phrase that it uses for the Isur of Lashon Hara, that one isn't allowed to say bad things, slandering someone else. Similarly, there is a din in this week's parsha of Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael, which actually, when you read it at first sight, is somewhat amazing and somewhat extraordinary. Normally, we don't think of Lashon Hara as something which applies to inanimate objects. You wouldn't think that you could say Lashon Hara about your car, or Lashon Hara about your garden, or Lashon Hara about a table. We don't usually think of Lashon Hara as something which relates to things, to objects. And yet it seems that Eretz Yisrael is an exception to that rule, and that actually speaking negatively about Eretz Yisrael, about the land of Israel, is in itself, the Torah refers to it as something which is akin, which is comparable to saying Lashon Hara about another human being. We understand slandering another human being, in that sense, is damaging them and damaging people's attitude towards them. And therefore, in that sense, Lashon Hara is one of the Tariag mitzvahs, of course, one of the prohibitions of damaging other people through slander and gossip. But one wouldn't normally have thought that connects to the land. And yet, in some way, the Torah teaches us about the land of Israel. The land of Israel is seen by the Torah in a different light completely. But the land itself has if you like, a type of personality. It has a presence and it has a personality. and the land itself is not totally an inanimate object, as other pieces of land, or a building, or a car, or an item would be. Therefore, Lashon Hara applies to Eretz Yisrael. I've said this quite frequently when I was a Rav in London, on many occasions when it came to Pasha Shlach Lecha. I reminded people that living in Eretz Yisrael is a big mitzvah. Living in Israel is a big mitzvah. Not everybody is able to do it. But even if you can't live in the land of Israel, it's important when you speak about Israel to make sure you're careful how you speak. Lots of people are careful how they speak about others because of Lashon Hara, because of the laws of slander. And they don't realize that actually the laws of slander apply to the land of Israel. And it's true also about people living here. Now, one has to be a bit careful when one speaks about the land and about what it's like to live here. And sometimes, of course, there are difficulties living here in Israel. And obviously we express that and we're allowed to discuss it. But you have to be a little bit cautious not to transgress this prohibition, which we find for the first and only time, really, in the Chumash, in Pasha Shlach Lecha, the issue of Motzi'ei Dibas Haaretz, people who are slandering the land of Israel and incurred a very severe punishment for it. I'll come back to that maybe later on in the shir, but let's have a look at one of the interesting debates in this week's Parsha between the two great commentators on the page of the Chumash, which is Rashi and the Ramban. So everybody understands that the Parsha of the spies was a disaster. And it was punishable, and in fact, an entire generation of Jewish people to live out their life in the Midbar, in the deserts, and not to come to Eretz Yisrael. And the question is, what was really the mistake? Or to be more precise, when was the mistake made, and who made the mistake of the Meraglim? Okay, so if you have a look at Rashi, and maybe I'll just read to you one or two words from Rashi at the very beginning of the Parsha. So Rashi says on the word Shalach Lecha Anoshim. So Rashi is concerned about the word Lecha. We find this form of expression a few times in the Torah, like Lech Lecha. Avraham Avinu is told Lech Lecha, but Shalach Lecha, the word Lecha, of course, often means for yourself, for you. But in some way, this is your project. So Shalach Lecha Anoshim, send people to do what? To be a reconnaissance group to spy out the land and report back to you and see what the land is made of. So Rashi says something quite extraordinary. Rashi says, Shalach lecha anashim. Rashi says, L'da'atcha. What does Rashi here mean by L'da'atcha? L'da'atcha means it's up to you. It's up to you, Moshe, whether you want to send them a raglim or not. Ani einei mitzav lecha. I'm not commanding you to do it. Despite the fact that the pshat in the pasuk is not like that. The pshat, when you read Shlach lecha anashim, the first opening sentence of this week's parsha, it seems like an imperative. It seems like an instruction to Moshe. Rashi says that the word lecha softens that imperative and is really that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not instructing Moshe, but he's just giving him a green light and saying, if you wish, Rashi says, im tirtzeh shalach. If you want to, then you can send them. Says Rashi, lefi shebo Yisrael. So Rashi now tells us you can't really understand Parsha Shlach Lecha without reading it side by side with Parshas Devarim. Because in Parshas Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu gives a different account of these events. We have actually two different accounts. When I say different in some small details. But in Parshas Devarim, the pasuk says, and Rashi here says, the pasuk says, "Vatikrivun elai kulchem," that the initiative for the Meraglim came from Bnei Yisrael. So in other words, we don't find that actually in our parsha at all. But in Sefer Devarim, and the Pasuk says explicitly, that Moshe Rabbeinu was quite happy to proceed straight from the desert into Eretz Yisrael without sending spies to as a reconnaissance group to report back. But the Pasuk says, "Vatikrivun elai kulchem," you, the Jewish people, you sent a delegation to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, "We demand a report given by some spies." So HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers. I'm just reading Rashi to you. Rashi says, "U'Moshe nimlach b'shchina," that when the people requested the Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu consulted HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers as follows. Now listen carefully to this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers, says, "Ani omarti lohem shehi tova." I have told the Jewish people that this is a good land. I've told you it's a good land. I've told you I'm taking you into an Eretz Zovas Cholov Dvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. Exactly what the meaning of that metaphor is not so clear. Needs a bit of learning what land flowing with milk and honey means. Israel was never particularly famous either for milk or for honey. So exactly what milk and honey means is maybe a subject for a separate share, but it's certainly, whatever it means it's a wonderful country. A wonderful country. As opposed to the land of America, I'm just putting in parentheses here as a footnote, that among certain people in earlier generations, America, the immigration of Jews to America was referred to as the land flowing with meat and money. So meat and money was how America was being described, which was certainly a play on the milk and honey of Eretz Yisrael.
The Golden Medina.
The Golden Medina, yes, but the meat and money, I always like that as a sort of a variation on the theme of milk and honey. So Rashi says, "Ani omarti lehem shehi tova." I have told them that it's a good land, right? And nevertheless, you are asking for a reconnaissance spies to come back and report to you, is it a good place to go to, right? So here I'm still in Rashi. Rashi says, you know what? Chayehem. So chayehem is a form of an oath. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying in Rashi's language, I swear to you that what? Sha'ani nosen lahem mokom litos. If you want to send them a raglim, do so. So here is actually a principle of Bechira Chofshis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, look, you have freedom of choice. I'm giving you Bechira to choose to follow my instructions or not. If you wish to not follow my instructions, you're welcome to send them a raglim. But, and here comes a very, very interesting line in Rashi, Ani noten lahem makom litot. I will make it possible for them to make a mistake. And that's it. Ani noten lahem makom litot. In other words, I told you, just go to Eretz Yisrael without getting a report, a viability report from the Meraglim about what sort of land it is. If you want to send them, b'vakasha, send them. But you know what? If you send them, that project is hazardous. Because ani noten lahem makom litot, they could get it wrong. When they report back, they could get it wrong. And sure enough, they reported back and they got it wrong. And the getting wrong, coming back and reporting negatively about the land of Israel was the disaster which struck the Jewish people. So let me ask the following question. You've read this Rashi. Rashi, this is the opening Rashi of the whole parsha. According to Rashi, when was the mistake made in this parsha? What was the mistake? Who made the mistake? So the answer is the mistake was made, according to this parsha, in the very beginning of the whole project of sending the Meraglim was a mistake. They shouldn't have done it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying, look, if you want to choose to do that, you can choose it. But when you choose that path, it's a problematic path, and it could lead to making major errors. And therefore, and therefore maybe it's not such a good idea. But you know what? Shalach lecha, it's up to you. One of the interesting implications of Rashi, incidentally, which I'm not going to deal with so much in today's shir, is that according to this pshat, there was a certain amount of culpability with Moshe himself. Why did Moshe agree? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, it's not a good idea, you can if you like, why didn't Moshe say to them, it's not a good idea, let's not send them? And yet Moshe Rabbeinu chooses the people one by one and he sends them out. And according to Rashi, of course here is citing midrashic material, that sending the Meraglim is was in itself a mistake, ab initio. From the very beginning it was a mistake. It should never have taken place. This seems to be Rashi's understanding, really. This first Rashi frames the entire parsha. The entire parsha is framed by this Rashi that really it was a fool's mission from the very beginning. They shouldn't have gone. Going itself was hazardous, and sure enough, they made the mistake that was predicted. The people believed them, and the whole generation lost their confidence and their ability to go into the land of Israel. This, so far, so good with Rashi. We'll come back to Rashi in a second. Let me tell you what the Ramban does here in the beginning of the parsha. Okay, so the Ramban is a couple of generations after Rashi, right? The Ramban is writing in the 1200s. Rashi was writing 150 years earlier. And for Ramban, Rashi was the great Mefarish. And yet, with all the unlimited respect and praise the Ramban has for Rashi, this is a machlekes l'shem shamayim. This is occasionally the Ramban takes on Rashi and says this commentary is impossible. This is not possible. In this particular case, it's even more a bit unusual, the question of the Ramban, because Rashi isn't giving us his own personal commentary. Rashi is choosing the words from the Medrash Tanchuma, which is actually referred to a certain extent in the Gemara and Saita as well. Nevertheless, the Ramban has great difficulty with this Rashi. I'd like to point out, actually, before we go any further, that actually in their hashkafa about the land of Israel, Rashi and the Ramban were really not on the same page completely. Witness the fact, incidentally, that Rashi never makes any attempt to go on Aliyah to the land of Israel. This may be because it was simply not at all viable or possible for him, but he doesn't even speak about it as something that he would have loved to do. We don't find in Rashi the great yearnings and kisufim for the land of Israel. He was living in Ashkenaz and he dedicated his life to the Jews of Ashkenaz, and of course Israel was part of the Torah and part of the Chumash and part of the Halacha, but personally Rashi was never connected that we know of in any way to the land of Israel. And quite the opposite is the Ramban. The Ramban, first of all, the Ramban debates with other Perushim like the Rambam, and the Ramban takes the view in a couple of places very clearly that going to live in the land of Israel is one of the Taryag mitzvahs. Is a mitzvah asay min HaTorah, and that anybody, and this probably includes most of the people listening into this share, who engages in the mitzvah of coming to live in the land of Israel, apart from all the other national and spiritual benefits of it, is actually fulfilling one of the mitzvahs, one of the Taryag mitzvahs of Yishuv Haaretz. The Ramban goes to town on this. And in fact, in the Rambam Maimonides famously wrote a Sefer HaMitzvahs in which he enumerates all the 613 mitzvahs. And he doesn't include living in Eretz Yisrael as one of the Taryag mitzvahs. And the Ramban, who wrote a commentary on the Sefer HaMitzvahs, he's got a list of about a dozen or 15 mitzvahs that he claims the Rambam missed out. And this is one of the mitzvahs. Yishuv Haaretz for the Ramban was a central theme of his life. So much so that in 1262 or 63, after the Ramban had successfully completed one of the disputations, a famous disputation, a public disputation, and he'd won that disputation and he'd humiliated the Catholic bishops. His life was in danger, and he decided he's going to leave Spain, and he came on Aliyah to the land of Israel. The Ramban came to live in the land of Israel, right? And he ended his life. We don't actually know where he died. We have no burial place for the Ramban. But we do know that he came to the land of Israel, and which was quite a hazardous journey in the 13th century. I think it was even before Nefesh B'Nefesh existed. I don't think in the 13th century there was much yet of Nefesh B'Nefesh or Mishrad HaKlita or other organizations designed to give him a soft landing when he arrived. And he came to a land that was full of poverty and difficulties and enemies and plagues of one sort or another. But he came on Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael because he believed that was part of the mitzvahs of the Torah, one of the Tariq mitzvahs, and his love for Eretz Yisrael. So this distinction between Rashi and the Ramban in their private lives, I'll come back to, please God, later in the shir. Let's come back to Parsha Shlach Lecha for a minute. What does the Ramban say to Rashi? The Ramban here asks a question. Not sure is the. So firstly, the Ramban has the problem that I mentioned before. He says, "In Cain, if Rashi is right, Moshe atzmo choto b'inyan hazeh," says the Ramban. If the mistake was the sending in the very beginning, then the blame has to be laid at the feet of Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And interestingly, we don't find in the Chumash any criticism of Moshe Rabbeinu regarding the sending of the Meraglim. And according to Rashi, we should find some criticism of him himself, because it was his decision, it was Shlach Lecha. It was left to his discretion whether to respond positively to the request of the people, and he does send them. So why did he do that? It was a misjudgment of his. Interestingly, okay, I'm not going to go into this in detail, but the Abarbanel, one of the famous Spanish commentaries on the Torah, does say towards the end of the Chumash, when the Chumash says that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to die in the Midbar and not go into Eretz Yisrael. Why? And he gives the reason. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu famously made a mistake at the Mei Merivah, whatever his mistake was. The Abarbanel suggests that really he was being punished for his part in the Meraglim. But only the Torah didn't want to say that out of kavod for him. So it cites only one of the reasons. But really, Moshe Rabbeinu ends up dying with the generation of the desert and doesn't make it into Eretz Yisrael. So it could be in some hidden way that Moshe Rabbeinu himself had made a misjudgment here. Says the Ramban, but the Ramban's main catch, what I like particularly about the Ramban, we'll see in a minute. The Rambam says, just bear with me for 1 second, I'll see if I can read you one. So the Ramban says, let me tell you what's going on here. He says, Ki Yisrael Omru Kederech Kol Haboim Lilochem Eretz Nachriah. The request of the Jewish people to send reconnaissance troops ahead and report back about the land, that was a normal military exercise. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had told us that we're going to go into Eretz Yisrael, we're going to fight normal battles. It's not going to be like Kriyas Yamsov and the Mon. We're not going to be miraculously in Israel. We're going to have to live a life, b'derech hateva. We're going to live according to the laws of nature. And the laws of nature are, if you're going to fight a battle, you have to train your troops, you have to sharpen your swords, you have to get yourself officers and tactics, military tactics. And says the Rambam, what is one of the famous military tactics? It's a normal military tactic. Right? In the absence of GPS systems and drone airplanes and all sorts of technology, You want to know, is there a road going this way? What's going to be on the other side of the hill? We want to be able to plan our military strategy when we come into Eretz Yisrael to fight in the best way possible. For that, we need reconnaissance. Says the Ramban, there's nothing wrong with sending the Meraglim. That was not the Aveira, right? Because, says the Ramban, when it comes to projects of this sort, says the Ramban, he says, V'zu eitza haguna. This was a wonderful idea. Rashi says it was a mistake. Says the Ramban, it wasn't a mistake. It was a very good idea. Why? Because Ki hakosov lo yismach b'chol ma'asav al hanes. Klal Yisrael were instructed with regards to fighting the battles for the land of Israel. Ein somchin al hanes. We don't rely on miracles. We need to equip ourselves as best possible. And again, the Torah counts the Jewish people, Yotzei Tzava Yisrael, how many soldiers have we got? And they were put into different platoons, and Yeshua was the chief of staff, and they clearly knew what they were doing militarily. Says the Ramban, if you want to know what you're doing militarily, you need reconnaissance. Sending the Meraglim was a mitzvah, says the Ramban. Completely diametrically opposite to Rashi, and he rejects completely the pshat of the Medrash Tanchuma. Very interesting this, that he rejects the Medrash Tanchuma. He says, no, that can't be right. It can't be right because we have the principle of Ein Somchin al Hanes, right? Sending the Meraglim was a good idea. And therefore, Moshe did the right thing. Moshe Rabbeinu was not punishable. Says the Ramban, so if so, that sending them was a good idea. When they came back, he said, did they tell a lie? When they came back, when they reported back, says the Ramban, the problem gets more complicated. When they came back and they spoke about the land, right? They first brought the fruit, but then they said, Amalek is here, and other nations are there, and you're going to face a major battle there. Was anything that they said, was it a lie? And the answer is, no, it wasn't. It wasn't a lie. They didn't tell any lies. There were no factual lies in their reporting. Says the Ramban, so we're left with a problem. Shlach Lecha describes the biggest disaster in the narrative of the Chumash, and a whole generation paid the price of dying in the desert and not coming to Eretz Yisrael. And yet, both the project of sending the Meraglim was a good project, and when they came back, when they told the facts, they were telling the truth. So what more could you ask for? When you ask someone to report back to you, you want them to tell the truth, right? So where did they make a mistake? Says the Ramban, they made a mistake in the following. There was one Aveira. What was the Aveira? Vayalu Banegev, they went, they spent 40 days there, Vayoshuvu, and they came back and they showed the fruit, and then they said, Bonu ela oretz, etc., 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 and they said to the people, V'gam zobas chalav u'dvashu. It is indeed zobas chalav u'dvash. So where's the mistake? This is actually, the Ramban is getting us to focus a bit more clearly on a deeper understanding of the parsha, right? He says, sending was normal military strategy and ein somchin al hanes. Just by the way, this idea of ein somchin al hanes, okay, I'll come back to that later on. So he says, where was the mistake? So the Ramban says the mistake was in chapter 13, Pasuk 28, they said, Ephes. The word Ephes. Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear Kriyas Torah on Shabbos, I know some of you might, I don't know whether you go back to shul yet. Remember shul, ladies and gentlemen? Remember going to shul? It wasn't such a long time ago that we went to shul quite regularly. Haven't been there for a little while. We've got a minyan here in our street 7 days a week, 3 times a day. So we get Kriyas Torah. Not everyone's got that. But even if you don't have a shul, even if you don't have a minyan, you should read the parsha for yourself. And when you come to the report of the Meraglim, and they say Ephes, what does Ephes mean? We all know in Ivrit what Ephes means. Ephes means 0. 0. They came back and they said, it's a wonderful country. It's beautiful. And the produce is amazing. And it's the land that HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised us. we are supposed to fight the battles, b'derech hateva, efes. What do they mean here by efes? The chances of our succeeding in battle against these warrior tribes like Amalek and the Kanani and the Chitti and the Amori, the chances of our succeeding are zero. There's no way we can win this battle. That's what they said. And what is that? This is what happens when people change, when people are asked for facts, and instead of giving facts, they give their opinions. The Efes wasn't a fact, it was just their opinion. Right? You often find that it's an old Jewish custom. When you ask for facts, you get opinions, you get what's called unsolicited advice. It's a Jewish custom. When people ask you for certain information, they give you the information and say, oh, by the way, let me tell you what's the right way to go. Right? I remember once in my shul in London, a very nice American family who were visiting London turned up, and they came, they enjoyed the shul and everything. And I said, how did you know about our shul? How did you come here? So actually they said to me, we never heard of your shul before. And we were walking up Goldsgreen Road, and we stopped another Jew and asked him, tell me, where is this and this shul? Not our shul, a different shul. And he said, well, you want to go to that shul, you go up and turn left and right. And then he said to me, but my advice to you is, don't go there. Don't go there. Go instead to this other shul. It seems to me you'll feel happier at Ner Yisrael. So in other words, they asked for directions, and instead of which they got unsolicited advice, and they got the opinion of the person they met about which shul is the best shul to go to. Of course, they were right in their opinion. That's a different story. But I call upon him, the way in which Jewish people sometimes respond to requests for information, it's difficult to know what is a fact and what is an opinion. Says the Ramban, the Aveira of the Meraglim was not the fact that they were sent. That was normal military strategy. It wasn't the facts that they gave back. The facts were all absolutely true. It was that they gave their opinion. Nobody asked them for their opinion. They should have turned around to the Jewish people and said, these and these are the facts. We're reporting back the facts. And now Moshe and Aaron will tell you about how we are going to conquer the land of Israel. Instead of which they gave their opinion, and once these highly esteemed people who had seen the land came back and gave their opinion, then everybody lost confidence. They lost their ability to believe that it was possible to conquer and settle the land of Israel. That, says the Ramban, was the disaster. The Efes was the disaster. There's quite a lot of material in the Mefarshim about what motivated the Meraglim to give their opinion here. Why did they do that? They must have known they were all intelligent people. Kulam Anoshim, says Rashi, they were all Choshev people. They must have known this would cause the people in Israel to be disheartened, to lose their motivation, right? Interestingly, the Sfas Emes and other of the Gedolei Hasidus take a very interesting line on, in inverted commas, justifying the Meraglim or explaining why they did what they did. Because at the end of the day, these Meraglim turned out to be grossly mistaken, and they misled the entire generation. Vayivku balayla hahu, they cried on that night, b'chia shel chinom, and that was the disaster. So the Gedolei Hasidus say, and there comes an interesting new perspective. That's one of the refreshing things about reading the writings of the Gedolei Hasidus. They sometimes bring the classic themes of the Tanakh from a completely new perspective. They say that actually the Meraglim were motivated by positive spiritual motivation. The Meraglim really wanted, they went into the land of Israel, and they realized that in order for the Jewish people to conquer and settle the land of Israel, they'd have to fight bloody battles, they'd have to plow the land and they'd have to build buildings, they'd have to engage in politics and in military activities, they'd have to engage in commerce, they'd have to really work hard in the Gashmias, in the material establishment of the state, right? And they came and they sat down, the Meraglim, and they thought to themselves, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, the views of the Sfas Emes and of Tzadok HaKohen, they thought to themselves, here we are living in the most idyllic spiritual circumstances ever known to mankind. Let's try and stay in the Midbar with Moshe and Aaron teaching Torah every day, surrounded by the Ananei HaKavod, protected by divine protection, eating the manna. What are we missing? What do we need? And what they felt was, if the Jewish people leave the Midbar and go and engage in a material national project, they will lose their ruchnius. They will lose their spiritual content, the spiritual content which was so precious to the Jewish people from Matan Torah and the Mishkan and Moshe and Aaron. Why would we go? It's a bit like Lahavdil Elef Avdalas, you know, a student who's been living and studying and doing research, and suddenly he leaves his studies and he has to enter the world of working adults. It's always a bit of a culture shock, right? You know, once you enter the working world, you've got all sorts of different challenges of honesty, challenges of work. Why not stay longer in the bubble of the Midbar, right? So in actual fact, their mistake was not quite what we think it was, says the Sfas Emes. Their mistake was they didn't understand that really what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us is to work in this world, to work with the physical world, and to endow the physical world with ruchnius, to avoda begashmius, what the Baal HaTanya calls avoda begashmius, to bring down the Shekhinah into the olam ha'asiyah, into the physical world. That's what's required of us, not to live like Malachim, like they lived in the Midbar. That was the spiritual mistake of the Meraglim. I call upon him, what we're left with is, let's just summarize for a moment. We have Rashi saying it was a mistake from the beginning, and the Ramban asking very pertinent questions. They're saying, surely, ein somchin al hanes. We can't rely on miracles. And this was a perfectly normal military strategy to send out reconnaissance and get back a report. So why would that be? We're in a position now, and that's what we have to do whenever you learn Chumash in depth. When you have a debate like this between Rashi and the Ramban, we have to be counsel for the defense of Rashi. What sense can we make of Rashi? That Rashi says it was a mistake to send them in the first place. What about the principle of Ein Som Ch'nei? We don't rely on miracles. So I think I'd like to suggest that actually Rashi, of course, understood, just like the Ramban understood, that in general, Ein Som Ch'nei, if somebody chas v'sholom is unwell, you call a doctor, you treat it. You don't just daven, you also daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't only daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you use all the physical avenues at your disposal. Similarly, when you fight a battle, you need generals and soldiers and guns and tanks, and you have to daven. You have to daven as well, right? Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach ki im beruchi means we need both the ruach and the chayil. We need that combination together. So Rashi understood that ein som ch'nei hanes. And yet Rashi says that it was a mistake to send them because ani nosei lachem makom litos. And here comes a very interesting contemporary issue. And let me ask you the following question. We all know about the battles that we have fought, we the Jewish people have fought since 1948. And we've probably, most of us have read or thought about the battle for independence in 1948, in which Israel was outnumbered and outgunned and had a very flimsy military and political leadership and basis. If somebody would have sent in, I want you to imagine for a second, somebody would have sent in a group of Meraglim, a group of, what do they call them nowadays? Consultants, right? Sometimes businesses send in consultants into a consultancy, into a firm, and the consultants have to send back a report. Is this business viable or not? Is this going to work? The job of the consultant is to give you a reading. Does this business have the manpower? Does it have the ability? Does it have the strength? Does it have all the normal, natural components of success? The consultants are able to add it all up and give you a reading on whether this is going to work or not. So let me ask you this question. If we would have sent in a team of consultants in 1948 before they declared war and asked the question, what are the chances of the Jewish people succeeding in this battle, given the armaments that they've got, given the numbers that they've got, given the strength that they've got compared to the enemies surrounding them, what are the chances that we could possibly succeed? I guarantee you that team of consultants would have come back and they would have said, FS. That's what they would have said. They would have said, FS. This is a mission impossible. There's no way that we could possibly ever succeed. Nobody could succeed. And it's famous that was true also in 56 and 67 and 73, and in the battles that Israel has fought in our lifetime. A viability report sent in ahead of time to report back and tell you, is it going to work or not, would always have reported back, this is a mission impossible. There's no way, b'derech hateva. There's no way under natural circumstances that this can work. And I think that somewhere along the line, Rashi understood this. And Rashi said, of course, in life generally, we have a principle of ein somchin al hanes. We don't rely on miracles. But there's an exception to that rule. And the exception to that rule is the land of Israel. The land of Israel is not included in the principle of ein somchin al hanes, that we don't rely on miracles. In the land of Israel, the ability of the Jewish people to conquer and settle the land of Israel is in itself something which is not explainable or understandable in terms of the natural numbers and the dynamics of military campaigns. In fact, I do remember, actually, some of you might remember the Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Shamir. I don't know how many years ago that is. It's quite a few years ago. Yitzhak Shamir. He wasn't one of the great orators of our prime ministers, but he had quite a sharp wit about him. And he was visiting in America, I remember, at a certain point, and I watched on television an interview with Shamir. And the interviewer was saying, how do you see the future with this happening and that happening and these enemies and those enemies? So he starts explaining, well, we're going to do this and this is going to happen, and we're going to do that, and this is going to happen. So the interviewer on the American television said, tell me, Mr. Shamir, what you're describing is miraculous. You're describing miracles. What you've just described is not something which any nation in the world can expect to happen. Do you believe in miracles? He asked. Mr. Shamir was put on the spot on American television. Do you believe in miracles? So he came back with the most fantastically original Israeli line to this. He says, let me tell you, he says, of course I don't. I'm a realist. I'm a prime minister. I don't believe in miracles, but in Israel, we just rely on them. We don't believe in miracles. We just rely on miracles. That was his answer to the interviewer. He said, the whole existence of the land of Israel is not something which could ever have been predicted, which could ever have existed on the principle of ein somchin al hanes. It is, in fact, something impossible. And if you understand this principle, you can read Rashi in this week's parsha with a new insight. Rashi is saying, of course, send out your reconnaissance people, by all means. You know what will happen? They're going to come back, and they're going to say Ephes. And are they right to say Ephes? Of course they are. Because b'derech hateva, it's Ephes. And yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has promised it to us. And therefore, our conquering and settling the land of Israel cannot be quantified in the same way as all other natural processes and natural predictions take place. It's on a different order of magnitude. So here you have Rashi and the Ramban. The Ramban is telling us the general principle. They're saying to us, yes, obviously, sending out reconnaissance is a good idea. Of course, if we fight a battle in Israel, we need tanks and we need guns. In addition to the fact that we need, of course, the zechus of mitzvahs, the zechus of Talmud Torah, right? Those hoyu ragleinu, Bisharayich, Yerushalayim, say Chazal, in the zechus of people who keep Torah and mitzvahs, your feet, David HaMelech, will be successful in war. But we need a combination of the two, and that's the great partnership that we have in the land of Israel between different members of Am Yisrael. We are working together to conquer and settle the land of Israel. Of course, we need the tefillah, we need the Torah, we need the mitzvahs. We also need the soldiers and the army, and we have to work together. We have to work together in a partnership. But the Rashi says the truth is that a viability report is doomed to failure, and that's what it means. If you look at the language of Rashi, they'll make a mistake. They're guaranteed to make a mistake because no one can come back from a trip to Israel, let's say pre-1948 or pre-1967, and say, yes, this is a good project. We are confident that we can succeed. It's nonsense. Nobody with any normal evaluation techniques can come to that conclusion. And therefore, it was a mistake that had to happen. So in a sense, what you're coming out with, once you've learned Rashi and the Ramban, it's genuinely a case of Elu v'Elu divrei Elokim Chai. Ramban is giving us the principles we live by, which is Ein Somchin Ala Nes. Now, of course, we have to engage with all our force at all levels in order to assure our safety and our security in the land of Israel. And Rashi is telling us, of course, that's true, but don't think for a minute that what you're going to do is going to work b'derech hateva. No one could possibly have foreseen or evaluated the way in which, Klal Yisrael would be successful in conquering and settling the land of Israel. So this is really what I wanted to share with you in Parsha Shlach Lecha, that it is really a very fascinating insight into attitudes to the land of Israel, something which I think at some level we're all aware of. I don't think anybody believes that the battles that have been fought to secure Eretz Yisrael have gone b'derech hateva. I don't think anyone believes that. It's never happened a natural cause and effect. There has always been the additional element that we are living tachas kanfei hashchina. We're living under the wings of Yoshev b'seisa Elyon, b'tel Shaddai Yisleinon. We're living with the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael had a lapse in this week's parsha. The Jewish people lapsed into thinking we need to know in real terms and in real time that we have the real strength to conquer and settle the land of Israel, and they were told in no uncertain terms, you don't, FS, you can't possibly do it. And at that time, at that point, they lost their confidence and were unable to enter the land of Israel. And there's also an interesting interaction here between a person's confidence to do something and their ability to do it. In other words, if a person doesn't believe they can succeed at something, usually they're probably right, in the sense that if you don't believe you can do it, you probably can't do it. You need to enter into it with tremendous confidence. And once they'd heard the negative reports, that burst the balloon, that burst their confidence. Once they didn't have the confidence, then they had to remain in the Midbar. They couldn't enter the land of Israel. They didn't have the strength, the moral strength, and the spiritual strength to do it. And that was the story of Parshas Shlach Lecha. And I always feel that this is a very interesting parsha for all of us today, whether we live in Eretz Yisrael or don't live in Eretz Yisrael, but particularly for us here in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel. We've had the incredible privilege and the zechus to come and live here in the land of Israel. and that we know that, of course, the army and the government and everybody has to work very hard to protect us against our enemies. But at the end of the day, it's all a nace. Our whole existence and the continued protection of Klal Yisrael is a nace. If you look at them, you only have to glance at the map and a glance at the numbers and a glance at the size of our armed forces compared to other armed forces to know that on a day-by-day basis, we are only here. Hashem is amoy v'nachalosa lo yazu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu hasn't abandoned us, and please God, we should continue to live under the Kanfei Hashchina, please God, for many years to come, al bi'asgo. That's the idea I wanted to share with you today. I hope you've enjoyed it. And Pashas, you can unmute people if you like now.
I'm unmuted.
Okay,
I want to thank Rabbi Kimche for his inspiring analysis of the Meraglim. He's been giving a whole series on the Maharal, and I'm sorry we had to interrupt those because of the coronavirus. We're really looking forward to continue with those shiurim, or even to start another series. We're hoping to start a series, if we can, in July via Zoom. If we can't actually do it face-to-face in the shul, then we will do it via Zoom. But a very big
wonderful
to you, Rabbi.
Looking forward to seeing you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wish you all the very best. I hope you enjoyed these few insights into the parsha. And, it's wonderful to learn Torah together here in Yerushalayim. It's a dream for me to be able to live here in Yerushalayim. We've been here now for a year and a quarter, and I still feel every day the privilege and the dream of being here. And please God, we should do a lot of learning together in the years to come. Please God.
Amen.